Dublin, a city known for its vibrant culture and friendly locals, has become synonymous with a different image in recent years. The streets, once filled with the joyous sounds of traditional music and lively chatter, are now haunted by the echoes of gunshots and the chilling stories of a brutal gang war. This is the reality of the Hutch-Kinihan feud, a bloody conflict that has gripped the city and shocked the nation. The feud, a complex web of revenge killings and underworld power struggles, has claimed the lives of 18 people, leaving countless others living in fear. Families have been torn apart, communities terrorized, and the city's reputation tarnished by the escalating violence. The epicenter of this conflict lies in the heart of Dublin, where two powerful criminal organizations, the Hutch gang and the Kinihan cartel, are locked in a deadly battle for control. The roots of this feud run deep, stretching back decades and entwined with the city's criminal underworld. What began as a localized dispute has spiraled into a complex international conflict, with connections to drug trafficking, money laundering, and organized crime across Europe and beyond. The brutality and brazenness of the attacks have left many wondering how such a conflict could take hold in a modern European capital. The Hutch-Kinihan feud is not just a story about gangsters and violence, it is a story about the devastating impact of organized crime on a city and its people. It is a story about the failure of institutions, the cycle of poverty and deprivation that breeds criminality, and the human cost of revenge. This is the story of Dublin's deadly gang war, a conflict that has shattered the peace and left an indelible mark on the city's soul. To understand the Hutch-Kinihan feud, one must first understand the rise of the two gangs at the heart of the conflict. The Hutch gang, led by the notorious Jerry the Monk Hutch, rose to prominence in the 1990s. They were known for their brazen bank robberies and armored car heists, earning Jerry Hutch a reputation as a shrewd and ruthless operator. The gang's stronghold was in Dublin's north inner city, where they held sway over a network of loyal foot soldiers and criminal associates. On the other side of the city, a new power was emerging, the Kinihan cartel. Led by Christy Kinihan, a veteran criminal with connections to drug trafficking networks across Europe and South America, the Kinihans quickly established themselves as a force to be reckoned with. Unlike the Hutch gang, whose focus remained largely on domestic crime, the Kinihans had a global outlook, building a sophisticated international drug trafficking empire. Their rise to power was swift and brutal, marked by a willingness to use extreme violence to eliminate rivals and protect their interests. As their wealth and influence grew, so too did their ambition, bringing them into direct conflict with established criminal organizations like the Hutch gang. The two gangs, once content to operate within their respective territories, found themselves increasingly competing for control of lucrative drug markets and smuggling routes. This competition, fueled by greed and a mutual distrust, created a powder keg in Dublin's underworld, one that would soon explode into a full-blown gang war. The fragile peace that had existed between the two gangs began to crumble, and a series of tit-for-tat attacks and assassinations escalated the tensions, setting the stage for the bloody conflict that would grip the city. The Hutch-Kinihan feud is not confined to the streets of Dublin. It is a conflict with international dimensions, stretching across Europe and into the Americas. The Kinihan cartel in particular has established a sophisticated network of collaborators and criminal enterprises spanning continents and fueling their illicit activities. This network, built on a foundation of drug trafficking, money laundering and violence, has allowed the Kinihans to amass vast wealth and influence, extending their reach far beyond the borders of Ireland. Their connections to Colombian drug cartels, Spanish criminal syndicates, and even Dutch gangs have provided them with access to global smuggling routes and a steady flow of narcotics into Europe. This international reach has made it increasingly difficult for law enforcement agencies to track their movements and dismantle their operations. The Kinihans have also invested heavily in legitimate businesses, using these ventures to launder their illicit profits and create a veneer of respectability. This complex web of criminal enterprises spread across multiple jurisdictions has made tackling the Kinihan cartel a daunting task for law enforcement. Their ability to operate with relative impunity across borders highlights the challenges posed by transnational organized crime in the 21st century. The Hutch gang, while less internationally connected than the Kinihans, has also benefited from this global criminal network. Their association with the Kinihans, though now shattered by conflict, provided them with access to resources and opportunities that fueled their own criminal activities. This interconnectivity between criminal organizations, both within Ireland and across international borders, has created a complex web of alliances and rivalries, making it all the more challenging to address the root causes of the feud and bring the violence to an end. As the sun-drenched streets of Marbella, Spain, a playground for the wealthy, became the battleground for Dublin's gang war. In September 2015, Gary Hutch was gunned down, igniting a feud across two countries. Accused of being a police informant, Gary's fate was sealed. Betrayal met with swift retribution. Lured to a secluded apartment, a lone gunman lay in wait. As Gary approached, the assassin struck, leaving him to die. The murder shattered the fragile peace, declaring war between the Hutch and Kinihan gangs. A life of crime, the short reign of Gary Hutch. Gary Hutch, whose murder ignited the deadly Hutch-Kinahan feud, was no stranger to the dark side of Dublin. Born into a criminal family, Gary graduated from petty theft to armed robbery. He cut his teeth in the city's north inner city, a breeding ground for gangs. His association with the Hutch gang and his uncle Jerry the Monk Hutch provided protection and opportunity. He rose through the ranks, proving himself a capable and ruthless operator. However, Gary's ambition soon outgrew the Hutch gang's operations. He saw the wealth and power of the Kinihan cartel and forged an alliance. Relocating to Spain, he thrived under the Kinihans until whispers of betrayal spelled his doom. The Kinihans turned on him, ending his life and unleashing a wave of violence. Retaliation and escalation. The news of Gary Hutch's murder reverberated through the streets of Dublin, reaching the ears of Jerry the Monk Hutch like a physical blow. The death of his nephew, once a valued member of the family business, cut deep, a wound to his pride and a stain on the Hutch family's honor. Revenge was not just expected, it was demanded, an obligation woven into the fabric of their criminal code. The fragile peace that had existed between the Hutch and Kinihan gangs, a truce built on mutual self-interest and a healthy dose of fear, evaporated overnight. The streets of Dublin, already on edge, braced themselves for the inevitable retaliation. The Hutch gang, though less powerful and far-reaching than the Kinihan cartel, were not to be underestimated. They possessed a deep well of resentment, fueled by years of simmering animosity and a burning desire to avenge the death of one of their own. Within months, the first shots were fired, targeting low-level Kinihan associates, a bloody message delivered in the dead of night. The Kinihans, never ones to back down from a challenge, responded in kind, their retaliation swift and brutal. The body count mounted, each death fueling the cycle of violence, pushing the two gangs further down a path of no return. The feud escalated rapidly, spiraling out of control, transforming Dublin's underworld into a battleground. Innocent lives were caught in the crossfire, victims of mistaken identity or simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The city held its breath, gripped by fear as the violence escalated. The once familiar streets transformed into a landscape of fear and uncertainty. The Hutch-Kinahan feud, sparked by a single act of violence in a distant Spanish city, had come home to roost, its tentacles tightening their grip on Dublin's soul. A city on edge. The Hutch-Kinahan feud cast a long shadow over Dublin, transforming it into a place of fear and uncertainty. Once familiar streets now echoed with gunshots and screeching tires. The carefree atmosphere dissipated, replaced by palpable tension. The north inner city bore the brunt of the violence. This neighborhood became a battleground for warring gangs. Residents lived in a state of siege. Parents walked their children to school, hearts pounding. The elderly retreated indoors, their world shrinking. Pubs and shops saw business dwindle as locals avoided public gatherings. The feud poisoned lives, turning neighbors against each other. The Gardaí flooded the streets, a reminder of the city's chaos. Armed checkpoints disrupted daily life, adding to the unease. The feud eroded the city's sense of security, leaving citizens grappling with trauma. Section 1. Storming the Regency, a brazen attack. The opulent Regency Hotel, a symbol of Dublin's prosperity, stood in stark contrast to the gritty streets where the Hutch-Kinihan feud festered. On a chilly February afternoon in 2016, the Regency's air of sophistication was shattered by gunfire, escalating the Hutch-Kinihan feud. The occasion was a weigh-in for a boxing match, drawing sports fans, journalists, and members of the boxing fraternity. As the boxers took to the stage, a van pulled up, its occupants cloaked in balaclavas and tactical gear. Armed with AK-47s, the hit squad stormed the hotel, their intent clear. Chaos erupted as the first shots rang out, transforming the crowded room into a scene of sheer terror. One man lay dead, a casualty in a war that had spilled over into Dublin's social scene. Section 2, the target, Daniel Kinihan and the shifting power dynamics. The Regency Hotel attack's victim was David Byrne, not Daniel Kinihan. Byrne's death, though shocking, was expected in Dublin's violent underworld. The attack's audacity showed the Hutch gang's fearlessness. Daniel Kinihan escaped, becoming a ghost, his whereabouts unknown. The attack exposed the Kinihan cartel's vulnerability. The Hutch gang's resilience shifted the power dynamics. The Kinihans retreated, their invincibility shattered. Dublin's streets became a battleground of fear and paranoia. The attack marked a significant escalation in the feud. The lines between the gangs blurred, spiraling into endless revenge. Innocent lives were drawn into the conflict. The city reeled from the violence's consequences. Section 3. Retaliation and the cycle of violence. The Regency Hotel attack ignited a firestorm of violence in Dublin. The Kinihan cartel unleashed fury on the Hutch gang. Dublin's streets became desolate, fear lurking everywhere. The body count climbed rapidly, each death a grim statistic. Victims were executed in broad daylight, showcasing the cartel's ruthlessness. Homes were firebombed, families terrorized. The Hutch gang, though outmatched, fought back fiercely. The feud spilled into everyday life, poisoning communities. Innocent lives were caught in the crossfire. The city held its breath, trapped in a nightmare. The cycle of violence seemed unstoppable. The conflict threatened to consume everything. Section 4, the Garda response, a struggle to contain the chaos. The escalating feud challenged the Gardaí, Ireland's police force. The Gardaí were unprepared for the cartel's brutality. A dedicated task force was formed to dismantle the criminal networks. Resources were poured into the investigation. Increased patrols, covert surveillance, and intelligence gathering were prioritized. The Gardaí aimed to restore order to a city gripped by fear. The cartels proved elusive, their operations secretive. The code of silence hampered investigations. The Gardaí achieved some successes, seizing drugs and firearms. However, the kingpins remained out of reach. The feud continued unabated, challenging law enforcement. Crime had become increasingly sophisticated and globalized. Section 1. A city under siege, the impact of the feud. The feud exploded into public consciousness, affecting all of Dublin. The streets bore the scars of violence. The city's atmosphere of fear replaced its once vibrant life. Tourism plummeted, businesses struggled, the social fabric of the city frayed. Communities were divided by suspicion and fear. The code of silence hindered investigations. The feud exposed deep-seated social problems. Violence and organized crime thrived in poverty and inequality. The city grappled with a crisis, threatening its future. The pursuit of justice couldn't erase the pain. The city was held hostage by fear. Section 2. Operation Resurgence, the Garda crackdown. The Gardaí launched Operation Resurgence against the cartels. The goal was to dismantle the criminal infrastructure. Hundreds of officers targeted the cartel's operations. Raids yielded arrests, seized firearms, and confiscated drugs. Surveillance technology and informants were heavily utilized. The Gardaí aimed to relentlessly pursue the cartels. The streets became dangerous for gangsters. The cartels faced constant pressure. Their movements were restricted, communications intercepted. The Gardaí were determined to end the violence. The cartel's impunity was over. Section 3. International cooperation breaking the cartel's grip. The Gardaí sought international alliances to combat the cartels. The Kinihan cartel had a sophisticated international network. Joint operations with international police yielded significant results. Massive drug shipments were seized, money laundering operations dismantled. The Gardaí could now strike at the cartel's global operations. Interpol issued red notices for cartel leaders. Financial institutions scrutinized transactions, hindering money laundering. The Kinihan cartel's empire crumbled under international pressure. The days of operating with impunity were over. The world was watching and the law was closing in. The cartel's influence was being dismantled. The international community supported the Gardaí's efforts. Section 4. The human cost: lives shattered, communities torn apart. The feud's human cost was immense. Families were torn apart by violence. Homes became crime scenes. Loved ones were collateral damage. Children grew up in fear. The elderly were too afraid to leave their homes. The feud left a lasting mark on Dublin. The social fabric was stretched to its breaking point. A generation of young men was desensitized to violence. The true cost couldn't be measured in arrests. The pain and suffering were etched in the faces of those affected. The city was held hostage by fear. Section 1. Living in the shadow of fear. The North Inner City's struggle. The North Inner City bore the brunt of the feud's brutality. The conflict hit hardest in close-knit communities. The streets became eerily silent. Fear colored every thought and action. Parents walked their children to school, gripped by fear. The elderly retreated indoors. Pubs and shops struggled as customers stayed home. The streets became a battleground. Fear was a lived reality. Sleepless nights were punctuated by distant sounds. Phone calls went unanswered. The North Inner City lived in the shadow of fear. The community's spirit was tested by the conflict. Section 2. A community's resilience, defiance in the face of violence. Despite the fear that stalked their streets, the communities of Dublin's North Inner City refused to be defined by the violence that had engulfed them. They drew strength from their shared history, their generations-old bonds of kinship and community, their spirit forged in the fires of adversity. They refused to let the actions of a few, however brutal and destructive, extinguish the flame of hope that flickered in their hearts. In the face of unimaginable tragedy, they rallied around those who had lost loved ones, offering comfort, support, and a shoulder to cry on. They organized peace marches and candlelit vigils, their voices raised in unison, demanding an end to the violence that had stolen their peace of mind. They painted murals on boarded-up buildings, transforming symbols of decay and despair into vibrant expressions of hope and resilience. They refused to let fear dictate their lives, continuing to frequent their local pubs and shops, their presence a quiet act of defiance against those who sought to terrorize them. They organized community events from football matches to street festivals, creating spaces where laughter and joy could momentarily drown out the echoes of violence. They refused to be defined by the conflict that raged around them, choosing instead to focus on the bonds of community, the enduring strength of the human spirit. Their resilience was not about ignoring the problem or pretending that everything was fine. It was about refusing to let the violence break their spirit, about finding ways to live, love, and laugh, even in the darkest of times. It was a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, a beacon of hope in a city grappling with a crisis that threatened to tear it apart. Section 3, the Garda tightrope, balancing security and civil liberties. The Hutch-Kinihan feud presented the Gardaí with a dilemma: combat violence while upholding civil liberties. Cartels demanded a robust response, risking alienation of affected communities. Armed checkpoints became symbols of a city under siege. Increased stop-and-search operations risked being perceived as harassment. Surveillance raised concerns about privacy and civil liberties. Gardaí engaged with community leaders to build understanding. Emphasizing community policing, they fostered relationships with residents. Section 4: Scars on the city's soul, the long road to healing. As the violence of the Hutch-Kinihan feud subsided, Dublin began the long process of healing. The physical scars, the bullet-riddled buildings and makeshift memorials would fade with time, replaced by new construction, but the psychological scars, the invisible wounds, would prove far more difficult to erase. The long road to healing required more than just time. It demanded addressing the root causes of the conflict and investing in education, job creation, and community development, offering hope for a brighter future. The scars of the feud would remain a part of Dublin's history, but a new narrative of resilience and hope could emerge. Section 1: A legacy of violence, a future of hope. The Hutch-Kinihan feud, a dark stain on Dublin's soul, will forever be etched in the annals of the city's history. It stands as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of organized crime. The images of bullet-riddled cars and candlelit vigils serve as a haunting reminder. The feud's legacy extends far beyond the grim statistics of violence. Communities were fractured by suspicion and fear. The innocence of youth was shattered as children grew up witnessing brutality. The economic toll was equally profound as businesses shuttered. Yet, amidst the wreckage, a glimmer of hope persists. The communities most affected by the violence have shown remarkable resilience. They have come together to support those who have lost loved ones. The Gardaí have emerged with a renewed sense of purpose. The lessons learned have led to improved tactics and enhanced cooperation. Section 2: The fight continues. Eradicating the roots of organized crime. The fight against organized crime in Dublin and beyond is far from over. Cartels remain a potent force, their tentacles still reaching into the city's underbelly. The allure of easy money and power continues to attract new recruits. A multifaceted approach is required to address the root causes of organized crime. Commitment to social justice and breaking down poverty barriers is essential. Investment in education, job creation, and community development is crucial. Law enforcement must adapt to stay ahead of evolving cartel methods. International cooperation is essential to dismantle criminal networks. The fight against organized crime is a collective responsibility. It is a fight for the soul of Dublin and the future of its children.